To be continued. To be continued. How are y'all feeling? Yeah, doing okay? I know it's dark. It's a little. We're back in an auditorium. We're gonna keep that energy going just for another half hour. We are gonna have lunch after that, but first we have a very exciting keynote address from Andrew Yang, who I'm gonna invite Michael up here in just a second to introduce him. But I do want to say two quick notes. When Andrew's up here, he has a new, yes, okay, this QR code that you see, that's what I'm supposed to tell you about. So he has a book coming out in October, and the AABDC has purchased several hundred copies. And if you scan that, or if you're able to, are you able to do it from then? Is it there? Is it popping up? Oh, perfect. Okay, so it should be free for you and free shipping, so you can get Andrew's new book. It's called Forward: Notes on the Future of Our Democracy. You might remember from his campaign, he talked a lot about universal basic income, and my understanding is that it's his thoughts on that and how that's just the beginning. So yeah, you get his book for free. That's what the QR code is. It's not a menu for for a bar or restaurant, but you could get his book. So yeah, that's that. And I was really excited to see Andrew's campaign. It was just so awesome to see that representation. Just to see it was really exciting to me. Okay, with that, I hope you are excited. Please welcome Michael back up here to the stage, and he is going to welcome our next keynote speaker.
Wow, what a great morning so far, huh? Let's give a hand for all the panelists again, right? Well, as you know, my name is Michael Chen, and I am really honored and humbled to introduce our keynote speaker for this Outstanding 50 conference. Many of you have known me for the last 20 years, and my passion for helping my fellow Asian Americans rise up to the highest level of leadership in this country. In fact, later this year, I'll be announcing a foundation called the We Too Foundation, We Too with the number 2, and that foundation will be focused on building awareness that Asian Americans are Americans too. Not only just Asian Americans, other diverse groups, we're all Americans. And that foundation will be starting later this fall. I've talked about the importance of Asian Americans making impact, not only in the corporate world, but also getting involved in leadership in nonprofit, in media, and in politics. Although I've personally dabbled in these 4 areas of leadership over the last 20 years, today's keynote speaker has far exceeded what I and most Asian Americans have done in our lifetimes. That being said, he and I do have some similarities. Both our parents immigrated to the United States and met each other in grad school. Both our fathers had PhD and worked for IBM in research. In addition, we were both bullied by our classmates because we were one of the smaller children in our class after skipping a grade. But we were also very good at math. However, as his stardom rose, I think our similarities may have ended then. After graduating from Columbia Law School, he became the CEO of a very successful GMAT test preparation company called Manhattan Prep. He has also been involved in the leadership of 2 nonprofit organizations, Venture for America and more recently, Humanity Forward Foundation, which is dedicated to promoting universal basic income and data privacy. In 2020, which was just, if you think about it, last year, he came out of nowhere to be a prominent candidate in the 2020 Democratic Party primaries for President of the United States of America, deftly using internet-based campaigning to build his profile, especially since mainstream media gave him limited exposure. By the way, if I was still a leader at NBC News when you were running for president, Andrew, trust me, your exposure at MSNBC and NBC News would have been far greater. He is one of the most recognizable Asian Americans to have run for president. He has also run for mayor of New York City and served as a political commentator at CNN. His new book, which you heard about, Forward: Notes on the Future of Our Democracy, will be coming out on October 5th. Yes, you can get a free book, but I already pre-ordered it on Amazon. you know? And you should order a book on Amazon as well, in addition to the free one you're going to get. We got to make him a bestseller, all right? We got to help one another, right? So go on to Amazon today, get your free book, but then go on to Amazon and pre-order. It's not that hard. I did it in 20 seconds with one click. There are also reports that I'll be starting a new third political party in conjunction with the release of this book. Very, very interesting. As an unaffiliated voter who believes that our two political parties have irreconcilable differences and have made our country more divisive, I welcome the entry of a third political party. One of my favorite commercials is an old Apple's computer commercial back in 1997. It was called Here's to the Crazy Ones, and features some legends including Albert Einstein, Thomas Edison, Martin Luther King, Amelia Earhart, and Gandhi. The commercial says, here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They change things. They push the human race forward. When some see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones that actually do. Asian Americans have been waiting a long time for someone crazy enough to lead us here in America. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Mr. Andrew Yang.
Thank you, Michael, and I want to recognize John Wang for bringing us all together and for his incredible leadership. And also, even more importantly, my mother, who's sitting next to John in the front row. Mom, can you stand up? I remember, Michael, when I first started telling friends I was going to run for president in 2017, most of them thought I was crazy. And one of the things I did say to them, if they happened to be Asian, was, hey, I think I can get on the debate stage. And if I do that, that would be a high watermark for the Asian American community. And I'm proud to say I didn't make just one debate stage, I made 7. And I remember the first time I saw myself standing on that stage after I got off stage in Miami, and even I had to do a double take. I was like, wow, there's an Asian guy standing next to Bernie. And then it was like I was that Asian guy. But that was a vision I'd had in 2017. I thought that there were many things that my presidential campaign could accomplish, but that was one I was singularly proud of. And one of the themes I want to hammer today is that I know many of you met me when I appeared on your TV screen on one of those debates or in some other appearance, but I am a lot like you, I'm pretty sure, like much more like you, certainly a lot more like Michael than I ever would have imagined, but much more like you than I think you might surmise. And my mom's kind of proof of this. So my mom and dad met at graduate school in Berkeley in California. It's one reason why people seem to think I'm from California. I don't know if you all have gathered that one. I take it as a compliment. And I was like, oh, that people think I'm chill or I have a tan or something. But they met in Berkeley, and then they had my brother in San Francisco, my brother Larry, who's a professor. I'm the educational runt of the litter, where my dad's a professor and my brother's a professor, and I just got a law degree. So I grew up in upstate New York, and as Michael said, one of the only Asian kids in the grade, had skipped a grade, was smaller, scrawnier, always felt out of place. And so for me, I think that that's an experience many of us can probably relate to. If you're like, how many of you all are the children of immigrants? I get the sense that, yeah, just about everyone here. And so you probably felt a lot of the same things I felt growing up, which is like a deep love and appreciation for this country, but also a struggle to feel like you fit in or that you're just as American as everyone else. So I grew up with that in spades, but I also grew up with the messages from my mom that many of you, I think, also received, which were get good grades, get into good schools, try and get a good job. And I'm going to suggest something that may be kind of dramatic, which is that string of activities I just described, which is so familiar to us here in the Asian American community, may not be the same thing as leadership. Like, if you do these things and you accomplish what our parents set out for us, you wind up probably in a similar place to where I wound up in my mid-20s, which was with a good job at a corporate law firm here in New York, which I drove by on the way over here. I commented to my wife, Evelyn, who I think is going to be joining us after she parks the car. Sorry, Evelyn. That's what happened. It was like, it's one of those get out, situations. So in my mid-20s, I was practicing law, and some of you, I'm sure, are also attorneys or have friends who are. And my real left turn came when I decided to leave that law firm and start a .com in 2001, which, if you are old enough to remember that time, 2001 was not the time you want to start a .com. If you'd been like 97, yes. So it's a little bit late on that one. No, my parents were not pumped about that decision because they told their friends, hey, Andy's a lawyer, like things are pretty good. Then all of a sudden, Andrew became a failed .com entrepreneur. So I think my parents kept telling their friends I was a lawyer because they didn't want to deal with the entire failed .com entrepreneur thing. So that was the big left turn I took in my career. And how many of you are either entrepreneurs, operators, heads of businesses, or want to be? Let's try the second one. So when I left the firm to start my own failed business, it was brutal. And I failed very publicly, where the secret to know whether someone's serious about starting a business, whether this is you or someone else, it's if they tell everyone they know. If they don't tell everyone they know, they're not serious. If it's like, oh, I'm thinking this thing, like, you can ignore it. It's only when they stand up and say, I am doing this thing, and I need your help, then you'd be like, oh, okay, like this person's actually committed. And I was committed publicly and then failed very publicly. So having that experience in my mid to late 20s was very, very difficult. And I struggled with my confidence, I'd say for months or even years thereafter, especially as a youngish man, where I wasn't making a lot of money and I still owed this law school debt and I felt like a failure. So that took a bit of time to work through. But I ended up finding my footing in the startup and small business world, became the head of a tutoring company called Manhattan GMAT that started out as a lone tutor in a Starbucks just a number of years prior. And when I joined that company, it was completely anonymous. And even joining as the CEO and waiting was an adjustment for me because working for a fancy law firm, people understand that. Trying to start a .com, okay, people get that. And then all of a sudden it's like, hey, I'm running a tutoring company. It's like, yeah, but that tutoring company was the best thing that ever happened to me. Because I put my head down, I just tried to deliver good results for students, build a quality organization, take care of people. And I did that for 6 years. And then that company became #1 in the US and was bought by a public company in 2009. And also during that time, I met Evelyn and was stable enough to actually be a good boyfriend and fiance and husband. So I'm telling you all this in part because how many of you find at least parts of this story familiar? Right? Like it's pretty familiar. You like have friends who've done it. Like I'm just like you. The next real left turn was in 2011 when I decided to start a nonprofit. Now, how many of you all work at a nonprofit now? How many of you volunteer for a nonprofit? You should just pretend and raise your hand to that second one. It just means, are you a good person? Yes, I am. You can pretend. No one will know. So I started a nonprofit in 2011, and starting a nonprofit is a great experience, but it's also very difficult. I seem to have a knack for taking on difficult challenges. And a friend of mine, David Liu, whom some of you may know, said to me once that nonprofits run on passion. And he's right. So he was very passionate in 2011, 2012, running this nonprofit. And after 6 years of doing that, I realized that nonprofit was not actually going to solve the problems I set out to solve, which were around job creation and entrepreneurship in Ohio, Michigan, Louisiana, and other parts of the country. Parts of the country I had not seen before because I had grown up in upstate New York and worked in New York City. And so I was staggered by what was happening in the rest of the country. And then Donald Trump became our president in 2016. And you all remember that night, too. And so I looked at this and said, wow, things are getting really, really bad here in the US, and I don't think people understand what's happening. From my travels, I saw that we were gutting many of these Midwestern manufacturing communities that were going red, and I thought that the best thing we could do is to start swiftly and broadly distributing economic value quickly throughout the country. This is not my idea. I know you thought two things when you first found out about my presidential campaign. The first thing you thought was, Asian guy running for president, please let him not be terrible, right? How many of you thought that? Yeah, a bunch of you. I would have thought the same thing, again. I'm like right there with you. And then the second thing you heard was like, he wants to give everyone money? Like the universal basic income, which was not my idea. Martin Luther King, Thomas Friedman, like a lot of other very serious people have been for it for years. It was actually this close to being law in the US in the 1970s under Nixon, of all people. So the fact that it seemed far out to us in 2019 and 2020 was just a sign of the evolution of the last number of years, socially and politically. So I saw that this case needed to be made, and I looked up and said, okay, if I decide to run for president, what are the opportunities, what are the downsides? And the downsides were time away from my family, opportunity cost and money, and total humiliation. Those were the big ones I could identify. And then what were the positives? And the positives were possibly advance our country's understanding of what got Donald Trump elected, possibly accelerate the end of poverty in our time, and possibly get an Asian American on the presidential debate stage. And then I said, is that worth 3 years of effort? Yeah, I think it is. And so thanks to the support of many of you here in this room and around the country, we got that message across to the point where now cash relief and basic income trials are being launched in hundreds of communities around the country. And this child tax credit that's being issued right now is a smashing success. I don't know if you've seen the numbers around it. It's legitimately reduced poverty in this country by 65% plus just in a couple of months. It's staggering what a little bit of money could do for a lot of Americans. And one of the reasons why I did what I did was that I saw that if there was a group of people that were going to get thrown under the bus by the polarization and the inequality in the US, Asian Americans are relatively high on that list, honestly. That's a disintegrating US is not good for anyone, but it's also really, really not good for Asian Americans. And I thought that before COVID came and then made Asian Americans all of a sudden victims of hostility and xenophobia. Pre-COVID, I would have characterized the treatment of Asian Americans as sort of invisibility and diminution. You know what I mean? Like it's like we weren't objects of hostility. We were more objects of invisibility, I'd say. I think Michael would probably agree with that from his time. But then COVID changed that and made it darker, nastier, more hostile. People like my mom walking around our neighborhood were attacked on the streets for no reason. And so the needs of the community are different now than they were in terms of being more urgent. But in my view, the need is about the same in terms of trying to bring the temperature of the country down and reduce the polarization. So my new book, I'm going to confess, I understand, it sounds kind of dull. You looked at it and you were like, oh, notes on our democracy, oh no. Like, even though it's like a barcode, which by the way is the coolest thing I've seen today. I promise the book is much, much sexier than it sounds. It's about how we actually fix the problems that we see getting worse around us, which I know seems impossible. So I'm going to summarize very quickly what's going on in terms of the problems, and then I'm going to describe in brief my solutions, which are different than what the press is describing right now, FYI. So, shocker. So right now, we are more polarized than ever. We can all feel it. And the reason is that the incentives actually reward polarization. Now, what do I mean? If you're a media organization, you actually get rewarded for being a bit more inflammatory, a bit more ideological, a bit more divisive on either side. If you try to call it straight up the middle, your ratings typically are a bit lower than if you just cater to an audience. And every media organization has identified this to be the case. Social media has poured gasoline on top of the whole thing, where then it will really fuel extremity. And worse yet, social media spreads misinformation and disinformation 6 times more powerfully than truth. Truth, boring. Misinformation, sexy and stimulating. I'm going to forward this. Makes me mad. So that is the set of incentives we're saddled with, but underpinning it are also the political incentives of our leaders and public figures, where right now, Congress has an approval rating of approximately 26%. That's how many people are excited about Congress. What is the re-election rate for individual members of Congress? 94%. If you make it in and you decide to run again, you're probably going to win. Now, there are a number of reasons for that, but the biggest reason is the nature of the process, where if you decide to run for office again, you have to go through a party primary. And it turns out that 83% of congressional races in the United States of America are determined in the primary. If they make it to the general, it's already a wrap. You know that's true here in New York, but it's true in 83% of races around the country. So if you're a legislator, what you have to do is you have to please the 17% most extreme and ideological voters in your community to win the primary, and then you win the general in a walk. So that distorts the legislators' incentives because their number one priority is not being primaried within the most extreme 17%, which is how you see a lot of relatively reasonable seeming politicians all of a sudden seeming crazy when they get in there, because they just have to try and keep themselves from getting primaried by someone who seems crazier. That's the situation we're in terms of incentives. Now, what my book is about is it walks through some fun stories about me running for president, then it walks through some of the institutional failures and incentives that I just described, and then it actually proposes the real fix, the real solution, which is what we have to do is we have to make it so that instead of going through a party primary, you go through open primaries and ranked choice voting at the state level. And we're already seeing what this can do. There's a senator named Lisa Murkowski in Alaska who called on Trump to resign in January. All of a sudden, all of the Republicans in Alaska turned on her. Her approval rating in Alaska among Republicans is now 15%. Why did Lisa Murkowski decide to make this stand against Trump? It's in part because Alaska got rid of the party primary last year and now has open primaries and ranked choice voting, so Lisa does not have to worry about having a 15% approval rating among the Republicans if there are still 50% of Alaskans who like her, which, by the way, there probably are. Do you see how this works? You change the process, then all of a sudden you clarify the thinking of the political figure. And it turns out that you can actually change the process to open primaries and ranked choice voting in 24 out of the 50 states just through ballot initiatives. You don't have to get Congress to reform itself. You don't have to do any of the stuff that we all know is impossible. What you do is you go to the state level, get enough citizens excited about it, and then you can just flip the switch like Alaska already did. So that is what my new mission in life is. You can do it as a Democrat or Republican or an independent, it doesn't matter. This isn't like one of these like team things, but this is the anti-polarization movement for the US that we've all been waiting for that actually provides a real solution. What do you all think? So that's what this book is about. That's what my new movement is about. And I believe that Asian Americans are going to be the vanguard of this new movement because we are sick and tired of what's happening around us. And we know we don't actually fit in that neatly to either of the political parties' principal narratives. We don't. No? Like everyone knows I've been a registered Democrat for most of my adult life. The Democratic Party is not exactly treasuring the Asian American community. I had I'll stop there. I don't want to, talk badly, but But I think that people can sense this. So Asian Americans, to me, are going to be the natural leaders in this anti-polarization movement. And I hope you will join me and prove those words to be true. I'm so excited to be here, and I hope that you're excited to help lead this entire country in a better direction. I'd love to take questions from you all. Thank you all so much. How much time was that? How much time do we have? 5 minutes? Oh, my timing's perfect, as per usual. I also want to thank my wife, Evelyn, who just came in. Evelyn, just want to... Oh, no, Evelyn. Thanks for parking the car, baby.
Two questions. First, if you had it to do all over again with regard to your campaign, what, if anything, would you have done differently? Second question, there is a school of thought that says that a third party, as you have described, as we understand it, might benefit one party over the other, right? Might help the Republicans. What would you say to those who would make that claim?
Here, I'll start with the second one first. So there are two states that have adopted open primaries and ranked choice voting. They are Alaska and Maine, which are reddish states. And so this is a reform that I think most people can see would help reduce extremity on both sides. I could certainly make this argument on either side. But you're already seeing it in red states. And there are red states that embrace this in part because it's more of a populist seeming move to open up the primaries. So I think people will see, as soon as they see the substance of what we're doing, that this is something that's going to make it so that fewer extremists win. And one concrete example I'll pose is that if the Republican primary in 2016 had been ranked choice voting, Donald Trump never would have won. Because if you look at the numbers, he was actually below 50% in most all of those contests. It's just that his many opponents split up the other 60%. And so if you fix the process, you actually get vastly different results in a way I think most people would be happy about. In terms of something I would have done differently, on the presidential campaign, I would have tried to spend more time courting certain members of the media establishment because, I think if they had been more familiar with me, that we might have had better luck with that particular group. And their influence was higher than I'd imagined, so I would have done more groundwork earlier.
Thank you.
Thank you for the questions.
Andrew, thank you very much for being here today. Just one pertinent question, especially given the times that we're in. There's very little representation of people of color in Congress, and even more so for the AAPI community. If my numbers are correct, it's possibly less than 2%. How do we get people of the AAPI community, especially youngsters, who are now more than ever politically active? How do we get them more active in the political arena and get them in mainstream politics and get them into Congress? And I think that would be really helpful to the community and get our voices into political America.
Tremendous question, and your numbers are right. Asian Americans are the most underrepresented group in elected politics in the country. We're something like 92% less represented than you think we would be by the numbers. It's very dramatic. It's stark, and it surprised me because I was like, oh wait, I know a bunch of Asian American electeds, but the truth is I know all of them. So then I did the math. I was like, oh yeah, that's actually messed up. You should have many, many more. So one of the jokes I used to tell on the trail was that Asian Americans are underrepresented in elected politics in part because of where we live. That we tend to live in very blue-dominated areas and in other places we're very spread out. So my joke was that if we all moved to New Hampshire tomorrow, then you would start seeing some political clout. Now, that's just the reality of where we live. But I think that we can do much, much more because here's the tough truth I've seen, is that when an Asian American does decide to run for office, locally or congressionally or at any level, the Asian American community does not rally around that person to the extent that you want them to. And that's true fairly consistently. So what I'd ask of people here, if you want to see this change, we have to change that. If someone decides to run for a school board, get behind them. If someone decides to run for mayor, let's say. Someone decides or Congress, at any level, we just have to make our voices much more consistent, I would say, on this. A senior Democratic Party official, and this was a few years ago, and he was drunk, but he said to me that the Asian American community is regarded as a low-level ATM by the Democratic Party, and that we're not even savvy enough to ask for anything real. We just want pictures. This is what someone said to me when they were drunk. but I have a feeling they might have said the same thing sober if they'd had some truth serum in them. So we have to change this by being more than that. We have to get after it. When someone decides to run, just pile in and make ourselves a force to be reckoned with politically. We have a chance to be the swing voters in many, many swing races. One of the things I kept trying to pose to people was that the Georgia Senate races were won by less than 1%, and Asian Americans are 4.7% of the electorate in Georgia and went 2-1 for the Democrats. So you can legitimately say that we were the swing vote in those swing states. And if we commit ourselves to being that swing vote, we can do a world of good in a lot more races.
Thank you, Andrew. And don't stop trying and don't stop running.
Sorry, was that?
Said, don't stop trying and don't stop running.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
Hi, Andrew. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here actually not for questions. I just want to say thank you. Because on myself, I actually work for the United Nations as an intern and consultant. And I spoke to the European Parliament just a few years ago. And I've been all over the world. So here I am today. I just wanted to say you thank you instead of asking a question. Why, as an Asian American, just seeing on TV during the presidential elections, so many Asian Americans inspire you. So myself, I didn't born here, but I'm an American citizen now. So just seeing on national TV, Asian American guy running presidential election, bring us so much big guts. Seriously. So that's why I appreciate, Michael, what you said today. So don't stop. No matter what outcome is, we have to go forward. So I'm here today, not a question, just a thank you for giving us a big shot to go forward. And next time, no matter how many times we fail, don't forget, Lincoln failed many times, and he won at the end.
Oh, thank you so much. The name of the book is Forward, too.
That's what I want here today.
Forward. That's right. It's not left or right, it's forward, and that's where we're going.
Thank you very much for what you did, and we hope, and also we support him for next time. So please just thank you for this guy. So that's why I'm here, not a common answer.
Thank you.
Thank you for your.
Thank you. And really, what I say whenever anyone thanks me, it's to thank my wife, which is true. And I'm going to wrap with that. Thank you all so much. I hope you do buy the book and enjoy it, because I think it's the best path forward for the country. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Sapna, and welcome back, everyone. Good afternoon. As I was preparing for this session, I was thinking like what to put forward, and one of the things which came to mind immediately was one thing which I'll never forget. March 7th of 2020 was the date when a state of emergency was declared in New York. on account of COVID-19. And mid-March, all the bars and restaurants and everything was closed in New York. And on March 30th, the United States naval ship arrived just a few blocks away from the apartment where I used to live in Midtown Manhattan. I used to buy groceries from one of the shopkeepers on like 48th Street and like Fifth Avenue. Her name was Fen, and she used to have like fresh produce from like Mohawk Valley all the time, so I used to go to her pretty often. But during and even after the pandemic, I didn't get a chance to see her. In fact, Feb 29th was the last time I saw her, and later I was told that she was compelled to move her business to another location on account of COVID. The fate of my grocer Fen was shared by so many small businesses in the millions. And we thought there was a solution to this, and that's exactly what I want to cover. I want to show you like what all did we do in that period of time when everybody was going through so many hardships. So one of the things which came to mind that all of us in our daily lives encounter small businesses. You may not be conscious of the fact, at least I was not too aware of like the numbers, like small, medium businesses and the impact they had, but I pulled up like some statistics that may surprise you. 28.8 million small businesses nationwide account for 99.7% of all US businesses. And interestingly, the money what you spend on like a small business generates 3.5 times more wealth than you buying from like a major retailer. And small businesses account for 54% of US sales and employ 56.8 million Americans. These small businesses make the news headlines, but you can see that their impact from the downturns was far-reaching across the economy. And the Asian American Business Development Center has championed the cause of like small businesses for years, took the notice, analyzed the situation, and spoke to multiple small businesses across the country. And we noticed a stark trend. And that stark trend was reduction in the revenue and the losses what businesses had faced. 81%, 85%, and 90% small businesses owned by Latinx, Black, and Asian Americans reported higher revenue losses. So the pandemic brought a twofold blow to Asian American small business owners. While we talked to small, medium businesses operated by Asian Americans, business owners said, people would ask, do you serve bats? Or do you serve COVID noodles? All these incidents had a cascading effect on everyone. I mean, financially, certainly the impact was there, but psychological impact was tremendous. And fortunately, through the work done by organizations including AABDC and other community advocates, including the Asian American Foundation, the anti-Asian attacks, discrimination, and harassment are being exposed and addressed. Of course, this type of work needs to continue, and in the meantime, AABDC believed that we needed to map out a plan for this time, because as like a centerpiece in this situation, we were like, we don't want to just sit and like count the statistics. So we created a plan, and that is the plan what we called Project Rebuild. So our strategy at a high level focused on like top three things. Number one was ease. That was primarily focused just on daily business operations. So like finance, sales, marketing, any support that you need on that front. The next one was on recovery. So if there was a business which had already faced the brunt of the pandemic, they were not having sales, what was the way for us to like help them out? And the last one was reimagine. That was for us to find like new ways and new ways of doing business. Was there a way for like these brick and mortar stores to go online? And was there a way for us to do that quickly? So we were trying to like analyze all these three things, and these three things basically helped us evaluate the small businesses from every particular aspect which existed in their operations. The time was of essence, and we needed to make a quick decision and take swift action. So to kickstart and to provide immediate relief, AABDC partnered with Hennessy's Unfinished Business Program that offers immediate relief and long-term support to Black, Asian American, and Latinx small business owners. And AABDC was tasked with identifying small businesses in our community that had the urgent need for these funds. In addition to these grants, we focused on like three specific things. The number one was a small business survey. Basically, the intent of the survey was to understand the problem. We did not know what the problem was. We were not sure like what the problem was. So for us to understand the problem, survey was the first thing which was required. The second one was, after the survey, are there any things, what can we get started with? What kind of things can we do on the ground? So those were like tactical on-ground support. And the last one was to scale our efforts. Like, what kind of things can we do to like scale our efforts? If they were at a small level, what can we do to like increase the impact what we have? So with these three things, we started with the first thing. First thing was around the survey. So we reviewed like 450 small business applications through Hennessy's Unfinished Business Program and surveyed those participants. The findings were very interesting. Like 72% of the business owners were Asian and Pacific Islanders, and 45% of the business owners expected 25,000 to 100,000 US dollars debt till Jan 2021. For people working in big corporates, that might not be a big number, but for these small mom and pop shops, like this was a big number. And 60% of the business owners receive a paycheck protection loan from the US Small Business Administration, commonly referred to as a PPP loan. But only 60% received it, like 40% did not receive it. So again, like it was a red signal for us. So this survey gave us a sneak peek into what the current situation was and helped us channel our efforts in the time to come. So as we progressed from the research front, we felt a need to build a coherent platform where large businesses can provide non-financial and pro bono technical support. In the past, large businesses have donated funds, but because the impact of COVID, what was felt by everyone, including large businesses, that approach was not working this time. So we kind of opened the gates. We created a platform where large businesses could come down, we can partner with them, and they can provide like non-financial pro bono support. Examples of these services could be, as I mentioned before, legal, marketing, general consulting, technical advice, or even like help to apply for PPP loans, because the process to apply for PPP loans was itself very complex. So all in all, this was a very impactful initiative. We received a great response from like a lot of small businesses and a lot of large corporations. So it was a win-win for everyone. And in addition to like the research and the on-ground efforts what we had, we partnered with organizations to gain some momentum, because in addition to these activities at the ground level, we felt there was a negative sentiment across the board, and people just didn't have that drive because a lot of things were reliant on those small businesses. So we partnered with like top-ranking officials, signed up CEO pledges, joined new majority organizations to build allyship, partnered with PepsiCo, and spread awareness using hashtag #StopAsianHate on like multiple social media platforms, and collaborated with Goldman Sachs to provide like pro bono legal service, and last but not the least, like engaged 24 like corporate ERGs. So these few things actually helped us scale the impact what we had and kind of target this entire issue, which was more of a systemic issue, but like it was also a thing which was felt by people. Because small businesses were like totally off the chart, like with the kind of issues, financial and like emotional issues, what they were going through, it was a tough time for like everyone. So this omni-channel approach kind of helped us to reach out to millions of people and gather their support, create awareness, and also share positive news to alleviate those small businesses. So the key outcome of the entire initiative, we were able to support 400 plus small businesses with grants totaling nearly $1.5 million. We engaged 25 plus corporate ERGs and started a dialogue with them to support these small and medium businesses. And 200 plus small businesses received non-financial support through the platform what we created. But we are just like getting started. FY22, we aspire to scale our efforts across multiple regions and global partners. And the next step is to engage more corporate ERGs and sustain the long-term vision through grants, pro bono support, and advisory roles. If this is something you're interested in, I'll be around to like take more questions, and John and his team is also there for you to like get involved. But we can't do with these partnership and these support actually mean a lot to us as we are like implementing these things on the ground. And as a roundup of the entire project rebuild, we wanted to create more opportunities and assure the Asian American owned small businesses that their voice matters and they are heard. We are humbled to offer support to these small businesses and thank corporates for all they have done to like support Project Rebuild. It's been tough 2 years for many of us. And small businesses have borne the brunt of the situation on multiple levels. My small grocery store was just one example. And I kind of felt it personally because I was involved in that interaction, but like there are millions of those small businesses which faced the brunt of this situation. But I've also heard many stories of courage, strength, and resilience. And finally, being able to help these small businesses and to give a hand up has been one of the most rewarding and fulfilling experiences of my life, and certainly been very helpful on the ground to these small businesses. It meant so much to us when small business owners came back to us and like said that this has actually helped them. And it's been a very fulfilling experience. I wanted to thank John for like your leadership. Could not have done any of these things without your leadership and mentorship. And thank all the corporate partners for like providing all the support. There's a long way for us to go, but we are just getting started. Thank you, everyone.